Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good midnight, depending on where you are. My name is Barbara Bierer. I'm the faculty director of the MRCT Center, and I'm delighted to be here with Steve Sonstein, who truthfully has been my partner in crime with Carmen Aldingers for many, many, many years. This group, this biannual conference, has grown in popularity and also in rhythmicity for the last number of years. So you are in the Joint Task Force for Clinical Trial Competency, JTF for short. The opinions are ours, don't represent any of our institutions or organizations represented today. The MRCT Center is supported by voluntary contributions from foundations, corporations, international organizations, and others, as well as by grants. But we are committed to our autonomy in our research and to transparency in our relationships, and we retain responsibility and final control. And so far as I know, none of us have any personal financial conflicts of interest with anything we say today. For those of you who don't know, a brief introduction, the MRCT Center is an applied research and policy center, which focuses on the conduct, oversight, ethics, and regulatory environment for clinical trials around the world. We have had a really wonderful experience managing and supporting the JTF. Which really has worked to identify skills, knowledge, and competencies required for the safe, ethical, and high-quality clinical research that we are all committed to. We do our best not to be a standard-setting, evaluating organization, but rather set out the standards for those of you who are doing that evaluations, and we are committed to providing members with whomever we can, wherever we can, guidance and tools to ensure those necessary competencies when people are involved in clinical research. These are the domains. You'll hear about the domains. Each of these represent different areas of competency. It is not role-based. It is really the entire team needs to have the competencies for the research setting in which they find themselves. It is not done, not everyone is going to be expert in each of these, but the team should represent that which they need. And each of those domains are further supported by competencies, specific, identified competencies that are written as statements. And of course, for any statement, there's various levels of depth of that understanding. And what you'll see is that each of the competencies are then supported by what we call leveled expectations. So fundamental, a beginner, a skilled, and an advanced. In the old days, it was see one, do one, teach one. This is a little bit different. It's fundamental, skilled, and advanced, but it gives you a good sense of what is expected in today's world. Interestingly, even though we did not anticipate this, organically, people have approached us and asked to translate the JTF because, of course, while we're English and Spanish largely, truly, people are from all over the world using this JTF now, and we want to make that available. So we always give permission, try to make sure that we know who is working on it so that we can make sure that they are appropriately supported with the condition that we can post the translation on our website. So today's agenda is rich as well. We're doing the welcome and introduction, and then we're going to have a 20-minute presentation from the translation in Pakistan through the Urdu JTF framework that Steve will introduce. We are going to talk about the Clinical Research Sciences Program Internship at the North Carolina Central University, and then designing an MS program in clinical data science using the JTF competencies. professional development in New Zealand, and then coming back to professional standards and recognition in Australia. So really a very global view of the use and sort of various functionalities of the JTF. The final note is that we have chosen when the date of the next meeting. It will be June 15th in 2026. Registration is already up. You can find that on our website. You will also get a notice with this if you have been here before, and Carmen has kindly posted the registration in the website. If you'd like to talk at that time, please let one of us know if you'd like a window to speak. With that, let me thank each of you for being here today and turn it over to Steve for the next presentation. Steve.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speakers, Dr. Saboora Waris and Dr. Bierer Khan, who have contacted us from Pakistan, offering to both translate the Joint Task Force Core Competency Framework into Urdu and to utilize this to help enhance the quality and competency of clinical trial conduct throughout the country. They've developed a very interesting presentation for us today, and I'd like to introduce first Dr. Waris, who is with the Maroof International Hospital in Islamabad. Dr. Waris.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting today's topic, that is from translation to transformation, advancing clinical research competencies in Pakistan through the Urdu JTF framework. So I will start my presentation. My presentation will be involving two parts. First part, I will be presenting the background, what we did and how we achieved the Urdu translation. And my colleague, Dr. Bierer, he will be presenting how we implemented it and what are the next plans. Let's start with what happens when a clinical research is only in English in a country where million speaks Urdu. Pakistan is a nation over 250 million people. More than 90% of people in Pakistan speaks Urdu. All the clinical research guidelines that are available in Pakistan are present currently in English language. I would like to take an opportunity to give an example here for navigational challenges. For example, if we are giving a map to the foreigner in a foreign language, he may reach the destination, but all the journey will be filled with lots of confusions and interruptions and errors as well. And that idea of navigational challenges also extend to the clinical research and clinical trials. And that poses a clinical trial risk where if we are using English only document, that can diminish the involvement of trial participants. And that poses a risk of language barriers where that will also affect the quality of informed consent and the clinical trial procedures. Thus, there is a need of essential translational needs are there. So translation is just not cosmetic add-on. That is a scientific requirement for the purpose of accuracy. We need translation that is culturally and validated as well in our own language, that is Urdu language. So why Urdu specifically matters in clinical research? So as I've mentioned, our national language in Pakistan is Urdu, and more than 90% people are speaking Urdu in the country. Urdu translation is essential due to its national relevance. We have also institutional support available in Pakistan. We have a special government is also supporting office that promotes the language, that helps to promote the language, that is Urdu language. And also there is a need of the regulatory requirement as well that all the patient-facing material must be translated into the national local language, that is Urdu. The challenge of language in clinical research is limited availability of localized resources. All the clinical researchers in Pakistan speaks Urdu. All the guidelines that are available to conduct a clinical research, that is good clinical practice guideline, investigator guidelines, all the SOPs, policies are available in English language. So that can lead to a challenge of misinterpretation of a technical terms. Let's start with example of phrase. When coordinator is trying to explain participant, they can withdraw from the trial at any time. That may not be resonating the true meaning of that, and that participant from the rural area may find it disrespectful. There is a term that we use, blinding, in the clinical trial that can be misinterpreted eye-related disease. There is another term in the clinical research is the adverse event. And that adverse event in Urdu translation, we translate is as manfi asrat. And that has negative meaning. So to maintain the technical and scientific meaning, we must translate that into manfi na mawafik asrat. So that is why the translation is required to avoid the misinterpretation of clinical terms. And training and communication barriers are there. Obviously, if the nation is speaking Urdu language and all language available, the guidelines are available in English. So we need to better comprehension, and to better comprehend the concept of clinical research, it is required to, there is a requirement of translation of English to Urdu. So there are cultural nonsense as well. Misunderstanding cultural context in translation may lead to mistrust or reluctance to participate among participants and patients. So here is the local engagement of Pakistan in clinical trials. And as you can see, this data has been retrieved from WHO website and ICTRP and Clinical Trial GOV. And Pakistan has conducted 5280 trials since 1992. And at present, there are more than 500 trials that are active today. A representation of Pakistan in the global clinical trial industry is 0.35%, which is reflecting a potential area of focus for Pakistan. So this is the slide. The data is also extracted from the WHO website, and this is the representation of growing trend of clinical trial in Pakistan since 1999 to 2025. And as you can see, from 2017 onwards, there was a growing trend of clinical trials in Pakistan. Because of this growing trend of clinical trials in Pakistan, there is a need for capacity building in the field of clinical research. And here comes the idea of the joint task force concept. Idea was to the joint task force competency, clinical trial competency framework, which aims to define the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary for conducting safe, high quality clinical research. And this framework includes 8 competency domains. And the idea was to translate that JTF clinical trial competency framework into Urdu language. So the non-English speaking countries can also make their representation in the clinical trial industry. The structured process that we followed was to translate the clinical research materials into different languages, and goal was to better comprehend, facilitate the training, and ensure ethical conduct, build the local capacity for the clinical researchers in Pakistan. Components of this JTF included the translation and then validation, training, and lastly, the dissemination. So why linguistic accessibility matters in clinical trials? This is because of the 2 reasons. Number 1 is workforce and system level benefits. It enhances comprehension of complex clinical research concepts, standardized knowledge across all disciplines. It also improves the capacity building nationwide, empowers local workforce, and it promotes inclusivity in the clinical research, ensures accurate implementation of global standards. And at patient level, participant-facing benefits, enhancing participant understanding, improve the quality of informed consent, recruitment and retention, promotes data accuracy, supports regulatory and ethical standards. So translating excellence, JTF competency guide into Urdu. So here we are bringing global clinical research standards to Pakistan and making all these complex clinical trial competency guidelines easy to understand for the people who speaks Urdu. And this will support the training and professional development and growth program for the professionals that are involved in the field of clinical research. So this is very interesting slide here, and how we achieve this. So first of all, we identified the gap because there is a growing need of clinical trials in Pakistan, and because of the genetic diversity and size of disease burden in Pakistan, there's a growing trend of clinical trials in Pakistan. And obviously, capacity building in the field of clinical research is required. So we made an expert task force. We made a working team which included clinical researchers that include Dr. Saboora Waris from Maroof International Hospital, Dr. Babar Khan from NUMS University, Dr. Munazza Jamil from McMaster University, Canada, and we involved the language experts, quality professionals. So this was a whole team, and we also included the regulatory experts as well. So first of all, the whole translation, JTF competency guideline, was translated into Urdu language, bilingual expert. That bilingual expert translated the competency into Urdu language, and all the translation was reviewed together by all the expert task force team. And they have given their comments and suggestions, and we made sure that all the scientific and technical terms are integrated as well, and their meaning is not changed throughout the translation. Afterwards, again, that all the corrections were made and harmonized. Urdu translation was produced. That was again reviewed by another independent bilingual experts. His suggestions were incorporated, and then second phase of review was started by again expert task force team, and all the suggestion from that second time was integrated into the single translation. And lastly, the quality expert reviewed the translation, and we have finalized the translation into Urdu language. And now we are in process of validation, and stakeholder feedback is required. So for the validation purpose and stakeholder feedback, we are planning a pilot study. My colleague, Dr. Babar, will be presenting about it and how we will be conducting the pilot study and what is our implementation plan for this. So this is how our Urdu translation is looking at this moment. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to acknowledge Munazza Jamil from McMaster University, Canada. She has started this idea to translate from this translation from English to Urdu, and we collaborated with her, Dr. Babar and Dr. Saboora Waris. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saboora. Dr. Khan is the Director of Clinical Research for the National University of Medical Sciences, which I understand has responsibility for 56 different institutions, which is quite a responsibility. So thank you for joining us today. And why don't you take over at this point and tell us what you plan to do with this translation?
Great. Thank you very much, guys. I mean, it's really nice to see that a senior institution is taking care of everybody around the world so that everybody understands the concepts, the knowledge which is being generated at the leaders' places. I would compliment MRCT here. Now, I mean, if we look into initial process have already been explained by Saboora, the ICH concept of harmonization, I mean, that is the key to the clinical trials. And if everybody is understanding the same thing in a similar manner, that is going to harmonize and that is going to make it really impactful. So, I mean, standardized clinical research knowledge across Pakistan is the main objective for this translation thing. And then, of course, I mean, if somebody is not comprehending, not understanding things the way it should be, then of course they cannot exhibit, they cannot do the needful, and they cannot do the job for which that place and that whole system is being existing. That is important to understand, and then the compliance, the professional development and capacity building. If that is halted because of the lack of understanding of a language, that is something which is really not anybody would be looking forward to have. So people would love to build the capacity, and that capacity will be built by clear comprehending and understanding of the language, and that is the reason we opted for this project. Now, I mean, if you see the pilot, I mean, how things started, did made some effort to assess the clarity, evaluate the interpretation, and then identify the improvements. And that flow chart moved in such a way that the method we used was to distribute this Urdu guide. Then we multiple choice questions assessment was there to have a feedback of the people. I mean, before going and before reading these framework content, we gauged that what is the current knowledge in the pre-test, and then of course in the post-test after getting the orientation and the training from this content. That was the main thing which make us believe that the really it's effective, because the climb from close to 62% to 96% was tremendous to the comprehension part after getting this understanding it clearly. Data analysis, I mean, that is another important point whereby we did check that what made them lacking in understanding of and the feedback and the identifying the true issues. And that's why with that process we refine the translation by 2-3 steps that helped us in getting the things and content across. We engaged almost 20 researchers of all the three categories: the beginners and the medium players and then the senior people. They had the coordinators, the quality people, the data people, and all the different diverse background people, so that we can have a representative sample, and we could judge that how that really language barrier was overcome, and that helped them comprehend and understand the content. The assessment metrics, we did look into the comprehension score, we did look into the clarity rating, we did look into the applicability rating, and all those things were technically taken care of while going for that. And then of course the pilot, which of course took almost fortnight to 3 weeks. Now, how we're going to disseminate? We plan to have, of course, copies, printed copies. We plan to have online version, the PDF version of this thing. And that is another good way of dissemination. Nowadays, people look forward to have in their respective laptops and computers all the time the ready reference for specific issues. So that will be there with them. And of course, the accompanying MCQ assessment tool, which is there to assess the comprehension of individual team members. Then the stakeholders as well. I mean, the Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan and National Bioethics Committee. That's the central, IRB kind of thing in Pakistan. We've got them also engaged. And because they also need the good comprehension, similar kind of human resource which has been taught in different institutions are employed with these stakeholders as well, the regulatory bodies. So they also needed to understand this very clearly. So we engaged with them. And of course, the academia, the universities, and we had the workshops and the training sessions. This competency network, how that is going to be utilized. We were developing some national framework for the patient safety and quality of care. And when I was looking into the curricula of nursing, undergrad medical education, and undergrad pharmacists, trust me, I mean, a lot of good topics which needs to be covered, they were not covered in that. So this competency framework is going to play a very, very good role in undergrad medical education and undergrad nursing education, undergrad pharmacist education. That is one important part. And then the job description. I mean, while somebody is opting for any job, they need to have the standardized job description, and everybody should understand it the same way. And the only way that can be possible is if they can comprehend it well in their own language. And then the in clinical research site qualification too. Same again, the jargons, the terminologies that which people have been using is sometimes we see that it is misunderstood by the local people. For the site qualification, for the investigator selection, investigators not as important because investigators are normally senior clinicians and they do comprehend and understand things pretty good. But still, I mean, that helped them understand and comprehend things better when it was translated to the local language. Then, of course, if we want to develop the accreditation standards, that also needs standardization and harmonization, triangulation. So those kind of things are needed to have those correct and solid background of the understanding and comprehension, and that helps. And of course, the training that at all the levels, be that the beginners or the middle or the senior level, that the training is always required, and that was also a framework to be utilized in future. Now, I mean, we are expecting to finalize this by 11th. I mean, by the time we'll be having the assembly with us, and then the material readiness in 3 weeks. The distribution would be 4 to 6 weeks, and then the orientation feedbacks. Whoever needs that, we will be having, in person or online or in the conference sessions. So that is what we probably can do for the orientation and feedback. And then, of course, the evaluation, how good, how bad, how impactful all these efforts are. So that's the implementation timeline. Now, the outcome or the impact, what we expect out of this is competency knowledge needs to be standardized and correctly understood by everybody, whoever is practicing in a primary or secondary or tertiary care setup or in a hardcore dedicated research site, or everybody should understand it in a harmonious way so that it's the same comprehension, and that's why the same delivery will be happening. Then, of course, the DRAP, we intend to put it on the website of DRAP as well, so that DRAP, the regulatory body here, they would be, in fact, looking and assessing things using this framework. And of course, then improved research quality and compliance and professional development that's what we expect people to develop as a result of this intervention, which collectively we are trying to make. And the net impact would be, I'm sure, a good comprehension, and with the things, the way it should be delivered, and with the result and the quality of data which will be, gained after the good comprehension of all the subjects. That is going to be the good impact of this activity. Simple illustration explaining, I mean, whoever is talking whatever, nobody's getting it. There is a fine difference between the noise and the sync. Just a noise, some people are talking about something, saying something, but not comprehended correctly by all the people. That is not how it should be. There should be a complete sync. Unless the communication is making people believe the correct thing, that is what is required. Specifically, this holds true when you're talking about informed consent process and informed consent, consenting thing with the patients and with the comprehension of the staff who is performing the informed consent. This is pretty much the idea of having this translation, and I hope that this is going to help a good number of people who wants to pursue their career in clinical research to clearly understand the way it should be. What we feel is that this transformation, looking into forward, the people who wants this to happen, of course, donors, the funders, be that the government or the other institutions or the sponsors, they need to understand and they need to really chip in. And people who will be executing, people who will be training, people who will be dispatching and disseminating this, these are the calls for the action, which all of us will be doing hopefully in weeks and months to come. This, I would like to say thank you to the people, I mean, the learned people of the language, I mean, Irfan, Yusuf, and Israr, and the kind of logistic and communication support by Zayana, and of course, can't say, ignore Munaza Jamil, who was instrumental in getting all this thing, done. With this, I expect that this Joint Commission is going to really be rewarded in times to come because of the dissemination of the true knowledge in their own, in the local language, like we had in the Arabic language and now in the Urdu. Because most populous country, Pakistan, and India, the most populous country, Urdu is clearly comprehended and understanding. And this is the future of clinical trials, because I mean, we are seeing the shift of the clinical trial from west to the east, and this is going to really play a pivotal role in getting people good comprehension and giving good results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for two excellent presentations. It's a very ambitious effort which you have described, and we hope that you will come back again as this is occurring and give us an update on the distribution of the Urdu translation and its impact. Hopefully you can do something in the way of a publication relating to this. So again, thank you, Dr. Saboora and Dr. Bierer, for excellent presentations and for contacting us in the first place. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, our next speaker it's a pleasure to introduce Tracie Locklear. Actually, I heard Tracie give this talk on her the experiential learning experience at North Carolina Central University at a meeting of the Consortium of Academic Programs in Clinical Research. And I thought at the time listening to it that this would really be something very appropriate for our biannual global meeting. And Tracie has kindly agreed to do that. So without any further ado, Tracie, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity. And hello, everyone. Greetings from North Carolina. I know at the top of the hour, it was mentioned that there's people coming from all over the globe. So it's an honor to be able to present the work that we're doing in North Carolina. North Carolina Central University, where I'm from, where I'm housed, is a historically Black college and university located in the Triangle area And we're actually very close to Research Triangle Park. And this is our economic hub of life sciences and clinical research industry here. So we're really quite the powerhouse here in North Carolina for clinical research. And the title of my talk today, I really want to share designing experimental learning with a focus on the JTF competencies, a little bit about our story at the Clinical Research Sciences Program internship here at North Carolina. So moving on, talking a little bit about our program, NCCU, we serve a diverse group of students from varied socioeconomic statuses and cultural backgrounds. And so our program is housed within the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences, and it was established in collaboration with relationship with Duke University and the National Institutes of Health Clinical Translational Science Award. So out of that, the vision that we have is to build a truly representative clinical research workforce of the future with a strong emphasis on health equity and community engagement. With that, our courses are online, they're hybrid, we have face-to-face options, and this is to support our learners' needs and the ability to meet the challenges of a busy life. Some of our learners are adult learners, and some are more traditional. So we really have to create a balance and an opportunity to learn across those differences. And so the students can choose from 3 unique programs that we offer: a Bachelor's of Science in Clinical Research. We also have a minor, and we have a post-bac certificate in clinical research for students who already have a Bachelor's of Science degree, or they're currently pursuing one at NCCU in a different department. So that could be pharmaceutical sciences more broadly. It could be public health even. So we really want to be able to offer the certificate to those folks. The instructors in our program are diverse. We have instructors, all of our instructors have clinical research experience. They are either current professionals or have taken, like myself, have taken more of an academic role and moved out of the clinical research role and more into more of a faculty teaching role. And that changes from time to time. So we really want to be able to give our students the benefit of individuals who actually have professional experience in the field. So for this presentation, I really want to focus on our Bachelor's of Science degree. This one is a 4-year program consisting of 120 credit hours. 47 of those are didactic courses with a 1-semester-long internship that's focused on providing resume-worthy experience and assessing career readiness. So that one's there at the bottom, and it's taken in their senior year. We'll talk about that throughout the rest of this presentation. Our courses overall offer the foundations for clinical research. They cover the Department of Health and Human Services Common Rule, as well as FDA regulations, as well as the International Council for Harmonization's Good Clinical Practices and beyond. So as students move through regulations to understanding how trials are managed, this includes understanding of data collection, data analysis, storage, as well as even thinking through some of those privacy considerations. But they also get additional experience, some really hands-on key experience, and that could be, for example, creating case report forms in REDCap. We have opportunities for that. We give them experience practicing their scientific writing. So it's so much. We even have a course where they get an opportunity to pitch their own protocol design. So design their own studies and pitch that protocol to us. We're housed in the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences, as I mentioned. So we really expect our students to gain some fundamental knowledge in drug development, safety, as well as biobanking, because we understand that our students will not stop at the BS degree and go on to be coordinators per se. They may decide to go into pharmacy school, medical school, and beyond. So we really want to provide as much exposure as possible in the short amount of time that we have them. So it's critical. So how do we do this? Our course objectives through the program are tightly aligned to the JTF competencies, which focus on the knowledge and skills and attitudes that are necessary for clinical research professionals. But when we think about it from the employer perspective, our employers, are really looking at the framework to distinguish fundamental knowledge in these eight domains from that of skilled workers, right? So we are taking a step back in our courses, and we're using the framework to build that fundamental knowledge in our didactic courses, and then scaffold that knowledge and assessment across our courses from their freshman year all the way through their senior year, culminating in that internship that I mentioned earlier. So for example, in their freshman year, they'll take a course called Principles of Clinical Research, where we discuss ethics and some of the participant safety concerns that may arise, such as therapeutic misconception, right? So we talk about what that is in that particular context. But then later on in their learning, they'll take a course called Clinical Trial Management 2, and even in their internship courses, they'll have an opportunity to gain more insight into what therapeutic misconception could be, what it could look like through case studies, patient encounters, journal entries, and other scenarios that allows them to demonstrate a higher learning and understanding and appreciation for some of these concerns in a real world context. As our assessments, we really want to focus on how students learn best. So we give students a chance to demonstrate their knowledge in ways that are fun and challenging, because these are undergraduates, but we also want to give them an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in the way that's more fitting for them. And so we have kind of incorporated the multiple intelligence theory. And what this really is the premise is that there are 8 intelligences. So there's different ways for people to show and demonstrate knowledge. And so it allows our students to better understand, engage, and contribute and celebrate their own unique learning style. So for example, in one class, we may have a paper, but then in the next class, they may have to do a podcast or a video presentation. And then we have an interpersonal skills class where they may be given a scenario they have to work through as a team. So we really want to make sure that that they're learning and they're able to demonstrate that knowledge across the different courses. And the way we approach our framework from the educational perspective, as opposed to the professional competencies perspective, is we use the Bloom's taxonomy. So this is a well-known, well-established, arguably the most common tool for developing learning objectives in higher education, right? And so what we've done is we use this tool. It's tiered framework that, starting at the bottom, is the most basic, right? So being able to learn or to be able to remember and regurgitate information, moving all the way up to creating new knowledge, new content, right? So we want our students to be able to do more than just remember what they're taught. We also want them to be able to apply that new knowledge and build on it and think critically about it even, right? We know that these are not graduate students, and we don't expect them to, for example, execute as a research study, but we do want them to be able to produce original work in some capacity that can be assessed throughout the classroom as well as their internship. So ultimately, what we've built is a program that kind of combines these two. So we strategically align the learning objectives or the competencies, as you would say, from the JTF framework, and we align those with ways to directly assess those using Bloom's taxonomy. So now I want to spend the next few minutes talking about our internship course in a little bit more detail. So this is our capstone course. It is taken by our senior students in the Clinical Research Sciences program that are receiving the Bachelor's of Science in Clinical Research. It is offered by itself. It is a 12 credit hour course. It is an unpaid guided work experience. Our closest partner is Duke University. As you recall, we have a really strong partnership with them. And we place our students with preceptors there, and our students work a minimum of 12 hours with a Duke researcher who is currently conducting human subjects research. It's 15 weeks for 12 hours and a maximum of 30 hours per week. The flexibility of this internship allows our students to be able to meet that minimum requirement of 12 hours a week, and then being able to do as much and learn as much as they want, up to 30 hours a week. So that way they can gain the maximum benefit. And we do ask that our researchers serve as more than just the research manager overseeing the students' research experience, but we also want them to serve as a career mentor, because we know that networking is a very strong indicator of how successful our students are going to be once they graduate. The criteria is that the projects themselves provide experiences that students can add to their resumes. And then the course coordinator researcher can also assess their career readiness. So most of our students work on site, but of course, we're always open to remote and hybrid opportunities as well. So here is a couple of our learning objectives from the internship. Our researchers and preceptors provide opportunities where students can demonstrate this learning in the workplace. So at the end of their term, the students are asked to give a 15-minute presentation on their research topic. So that means they actually have to have conducted research, right? They can't be printing papers or answering emails. They actually have to be doing some physical research. And that's important. And we make sure that is clearly established. So they give a 15-minute presentation on the research topic and as well as the work that they completed, how they contributed, and how this work prepared them for the next career goals. Our students are graded on a rubric based on their understanding of the research that they've helped conduct, the application to human health and future research, as well as their ability to communicate what they've learned with the general public, which includes ourselves and others, and the application of the research that they conducted to their future career objectives. So we really want to know, how is this going to forward? Like, what did you learn, and how is it going to catapult you forward to your next career? And then also, like, how's it going to look on your resume? How are you going to explain that if you're deciding to if you're applying for a job after you graduate? How are you going to explain this experience to a recruiter or a hiring manager? How are you going to explain what it is that you learned? And so from here, you can see some of what those activities look like. We really emphasize being able to observe and practice patient encounters and being able to build things, practice what they've learned, building databases, building case report forms, data cleaning, collecting data, document preparation reviews, doing maybe like a ICF checklist, things like that. So we really give our preceptors and researchers some ideas of internship activities that would be appropriate. And then quickly, I want to highlight this because we also have opportunities at NCCU. I don't want to make it sound like everything is at Duke. Not everything is at Duke. NCCU, we specialize in community engagement and community partnerships. So I quickly want to highlight the research opportunities that students have with us as well. That's not, it's not limited to the clinical research internship students. Our Research Center for Minority Institute Health Disparities at NCCU, we not only conduct research in health disparities, but we also have a robust community engagement arm as well. And we leverage this RCMI infrastructure for our students so that they can participate in community outreach. They help with education around what is clinical research, what are clinical trials, why clinical trials are important, and why participation by underrepresented communities is important. They also assist with outreach initiatives. They provide clinical research education. They do question and answer sessions. They provide mobile health tours, or mobile unit tours with our mobile health unit right there, if you can see it up in the upper right-hand corner there. So it helps them to build and practice their communication skills, their leadership skills, and they also gain some research experience in a real-world setting as well. We really are looking forward to being able to build out this offering so that we have more students who are able to do full internships with our researchers at NCCU who are conducting human subjects research. So finally, how we evaluate. So we've taken what the JTF competencies are, we scaffolded them across our courses, and then in our internship, we evaluate them. So how well were students able to adhere to a study protocol? This is assessed through preceptor feedback. We use their journal entries and discussion boards to assess learning and understanding, not just around the research professional's goals, but also things like if you were working with a patient, the misconception ideas, therapeutic misconception. So any kind of things that arise during the 15-week internship, we try to assess knowledge and understanding around that. We think that professionalism and leadership are huge for our undergrads, right? This is also students who have lived through and did not in any way benefit from the lockdown as far as like social experiences. So we really want to reinforce the dress code and the attendance policies, as well as verbal and written communication adherence. And so we assess these things using a rubric that we use, as well as the preceptors use. I do want to point to a publication that kind of outlines how we thought about our internship program going into it before we started. So if you want to see more about the thought processes and everything that has gone into creating this internship, there's a publication out there for you from my colleagues and myself that we published back in 2023 that gives more detail into that. Obviously, the experiences and the placements change from year to year, but the fundamentals remain. And then finally, in closing, so far we've had 9 students who have gone through our internship course since fall of 2023. 3 more who are going into our internship starting in spring of 2026, so here in January. We have a protocol in place that's going to actually assess the internship from the student's perspective. So from their eyes, using a pre-post quasi-experimental study design that's using the internship as the intervention, kind of to gain insight to the students' experiences around self-efficacy, particularly around their careers, how they feel like the internship prepared them for their career going forward, how they feel as far as one of the things that we know that we have for our students is this feeling of imposter syndrome. So we want to promote belonging, and particularly in the clinical research industry. So we want to assess that. The mentorship experience, as well as access to future research opportunities and future career goals. How well do you feel that you were prepared? We hope that over the next year or so, we can recruit about 30 students to participate in this research activity so that we can use those findings to not only strengthen the course, but also to improve our future workforce as well. So there's so much more to come from NCCU on that. For more information about the program, any way to contribute, if you want to be a mentor to our wonderful students, please reach out to me. My contact information is here.
Well, thank you so much, Tracie, for that excellent presentation. And I know that there are multiple academic programs as well as corporate entities that are looking to develop experiential learning options for individuals. And Susan, I see you there smiling also, because it fits very well into the workforce development efforts that you're so actively involved in.
Absolutely.
And thanks for your contact information and the publication availability. Our next speaker is Rick Ittenbach, who's at the Medical College, University of Cincinnati. And I met Rick because he's part of the data management and informatics work group that we're working on. He has offered to present today on the MS program, the Clinical Data Sciences, which has been developed utilizing the Joint Task Force framework. So Rick, let me turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Carmen, Barbara, Steve, thanks for the opportunity to be here and share a little bit about our program with you all. It's truly an honor. So just as a point of reference, our graduate program, the purpose of it is to focus on and instruct the students in the measurement, acquisition, care, treatment, analysis, and inferencing of clinical research data. So basically, it's from the conceptualization and design standpoint all the way through analysis and inferencing and even post-market surveillance and analysis if needed. We did this in large part because of the great need there is in America and across the world for skilled, in-depth instruction in data science. Our 2 specific outcomes would be to prepare students for work in academic, industry, and government research settings, and to provide a unifying knowledge base for a profession that hasn't had one, straight up hasn't had one. And so the schematic over here, basically, that we use to guide our program is that our data science program builds on the foundations and content knowledge from 4 component disciplines: biostatistics, computer science and biomedical informatics, biomedical science/medicine, and regulatory science. The goal throughout it all is not to duplicate the fundamental knowledge base, but to extend it as we develop and do what Zerhouni said needed to be done in his New England Journal paper 20 years ago, begin to create new sciences out of traditional ones. And we believe we fully embody that spirit. So in terms of core principles, just to put us all on the same foundation, First and foremost, clinical data management and its synonym, clinical data science, was actually a job class mandated by Congress, not explicitly, but through what it did socially, culturally, legally, through creation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 38 and the Kefauver-Harris amendments of the early 60s, which basically acknowledged the shortcomings in the development of drugs, devices, and what came to be biologics. It required there to be more oversight, more enforcement capability and responsibility in the FDA. But what that did in turn was force industry to ramp up their game, provide better safety, reliability, and efficacy data with all new and existing drug and device applications. And so what that did was created a workforce that did not exist previously. And what happened, so the profession was born and nurtured in industry. There was a little bit of flirting with academia, but at the early 70s, when the federal government began trying to invest in the development of this workforce with Vietnam War and everything, funds were going to other places, understandably, and so they couldn't sustain the funding. The educational programs kind of waned, and it went back into industry, and they were the ones whose livelihood and public health depended on it, and so that's where it continued to reside for 50 years. So what's happened is that field that we've known as clinical data management, now clinical data science, has matured, has advanced, has found their niche and their role in the biomedical enterprise, but the training is not. And part of the reason is because the training component of industry was always subordinate to the needs of the corporation and the drugs and devices that they were investing in. Having said that, so science has advanced to the point to where on-the-job training just wasn't going to work, and its days are numbered. And so what we at Cincinnati felt like we needed to do was to formally develop a graduate program. Part of it comes from when I was helping out the Department of Labor back around 2012, 2014. And they were contemplating the development of this new profession, this adding it to the lexicon of the government's dictionary of titles. And I asked them at the time, I said, when you're cutting the job classes by 90%, why in the world would you add a new one? And their answer was straight up, because it was a job class of the future. They were 100% right. And at the time, at least we were working on this in 2014, there were only about 13,000 professionals reporting to be data managers and data scientists. We flash forward 12 years, 2025, there's now more than 200,000 professionals reporting that job title, which is more than a 15-fold increase in the workforce. And so what's happening again, the field is exploding. They found their place in the biomedical enterprise. They're maturing, they're developing, but they were doing this absent formal training. So we felt like we needed to do it, but with the recognition that all complex disciplines tend to rest on complex subcomponents. And that's true of data science. Data science historically has rested on biostatistics and statistics and computer science and informatics, two very detailed, technically oriented disciplines. In addition, though, clinical data science incorporates fundamental tenets of medicine and biomedical science. Again, another very sophisticated component. And given the fact that medicine today, biomedical research today are highly regulated fields, we can't operate outside of a regulatory model. And so the professionals that we're training, that we're working with, are responsible for holding us to those regulatory frameworks. And so it becomes a very complicated network. It is a translational science. In the words of Chris Austin, who wrote not long ago about many of the challenges of the development of this new translational science, there was a need not only to develop sophisticated, insightful professionals, but the need to train professionals who could look across the borders of the different sciences and see the possibilities of tomorrow. And that's what we're trying to do, but work within, show fidelity to operational and regulatory constraints. Knowing this, the reality of it is, while most of America knows what an accountant is, they know what a geographer is, or they know what a postal carrier is, And where there's good mapping between the labor market and the education and training of these professions, there is not good mapping between the labor market and clinical and translational scientists, particularly in this case, clinical data scientists. And that's because different programs emphasize different things, and they come from different backgrounds and orientations. At the end of the day, what we're dealing with, though, in the year 2025 looking forward, is the need for a dedicated, structured learning model that is crucial to train clinical data scientists today, consistent and commensurate with the colleagues with whom they work, the physicians, the advanced practice nurses, the statisticians, the informaticians. Those are highly technical fields. And if you don't have a formal training background, it's difficult to be on the same foundation and contribute to the science with the same fidelity, with the same integrity that they're bringing to their work. All right, the rationale to fill out this picture further. To the best of our knowledge, there are no formal educational programs in clinical data science today. 2 or 3 health data science programs, a couple of biomedical, but no true clinical data science programs that come out of the spirit of the Kefauver-Harris Amendment in the pharmaceutical and drug and device development area. Now, what do the educational programs look like currently? Well, most of them, the ones with the most integrity, in my opinion, come out of rebranded statistics and computer science programs. The most high frequency programs, though, are the employer-based programs. And because of the absence of formal education programs, so much training has to be done and reduplicated in-house. There are a number of professional short courses. I list some of the societies there that you're familiar with. And of course, there are online learning platforms. The issue, though, with online learning programs, society, short courses and things, is that they often are encapsulated, they're short, they're packaged, and they lack the continuity and the cross-fertilization of the correlated courses. And so in essence, they lack the depth. But what does the population look like? So I've already highlighted for you what I consider to be the weaknesses of the current educational model. But what does the population, the cohort, look like? Well, I can tell you right now, the 2 job classes that carry the same federal job code, clinical data scientist and clinical data manager. I've already mentioned that there are just over 200,000 today with a growth rate of about 9%, adjusted growth rate of 9%. In the words of the Department of Labor, they carry a bright to very bright picture. Median salary in the U.S. as of July 29th. I'm drawing the numbers in the slides that I presented at the Joint Statistical Meeting in Nashville this summer. $112,600 for a median salary. Now, many people may not balk at that, but what I find astonishing is that there is no formal educational requirement for this job class. 85% of the cohort has a bachelor's degree only, 5% associate's degree with 10% other. The SVP rating, the average amount of experience needed for maturity in the profession, which is about 4 to 7 years with a range of 2 to 10 years, means extensive time in the field. Well, extensive time in the field here is basically 4 to 7 years to earn a median salary of $112,000 with a bachelor's degree. I find that astounding and astonishing. I think it's great, but I find it astonishing that you can that quickly get that salary in a highly technical field. The need that we're seeing in Ohio and that you may be seeing in Massachusetts and other places is extended across the world. And I can, at the end of this, I have references and you're welcome to look at those from the other countries, Australia, Western Europe, Canada, in Asia, same need that we're seeing, Ukraine. Here are our competencies that derive from, we have 5 thematic areas. If we're going to have a clinical data science program, it has to be a science. And so the point here is that we approach the data and the need to drill down on the data with measures, theory, and fundamentals using a scientific lens, but with fidelity to regulatory science, leadership fundamentals, and professional communication that Tracie had alluded to before. Because this is an educational program, and Department of Labor has jurisdiction once people enter the workforce. Prior to the workforce, the Department of Education and NCES has jurisdiction over the programs. To be a clinical data science program or a data science program proper, it's got to have the qualities here. Interdisciplinary perspective. It's got to bring together statistics, computer science, modeling, representation, storage, But ours will be a clinical data science. So we have to retain the properties of data science general, but we extend it to medicine, health data science, and biostatistics. So just a very quick snapshot of what our program looks like. It started off as a 48-hour program, but by the time they finished beating on me, it was a 33-hour program. Top courses are our fundamental core courses, the bread and butter courses. The research courses are the ones below it. They draw from the disciplines that I showed before: statistics, computer science and informatics, medicine, and then regulatory. But we've also added a 3-hour course in clinical research ethics taught in philosophy. So it's not taught by folks in medicine. But when I started this, it was a 48-hour program. What they've sent, the dean of medicine said, won't work. It's got to be in and out in 12 months. We want a 1-year program. That's fine. So we busted down to 30 hours. Then as I'm working my way up the chain of approvals through the state, then the dean of the graduate school says 1-year program won't work. It's got to be 2 years. We're a university of 50,000 students. The average age is over 30. Most of our student base has a full-time job. You got to find a way to have part-time options. And so what you're looking at in the middle is a 12-month intensive program. On the right-hand side is a 2-year part-time model. And then in terms of methodology, this program was created with great attention to detail. Phase one, well, I developed a theoretical framework first, went to the ordered sequence of courses, went through the research courses that support them, the electives, and then the pervasive skills. Tracie talked a lot about those, just as important. We want to teach and model things like critical thinking, leadership, communication. But to do this, we had to map our courses to core competencies of 4 professional societies, of which JTF was one. And then once our our courses were developed, then we shared them with local experts, got feedback, refined them, went to regional, national experts, refined them, then went to the International Advisory Board. So here's the mapping with JTF. And so we have just 2 of the domains, 1 and 6. We're not intending to be a duplicitous program with JTF, but we wanted to draw as much as we could and as heavily as we could from there and borrow from the richnesses of the JTF model. Left-hand side are the actual domain items. Across the top are our actual courses. The course I teach is the first one, CDS 6010. The W in there is the week in our 15, 16-week program that we actually teach that content. And then, as you can see, we carry that through. So it's not just a one and done, but we teach that content throughout all of our different courses. Now, you'll probably notice the very last class in philosophy 6050, there's not a lot of JTF that we know right now that's taught, but that's okay. We don't want every class teaching all components. So this is where we map to JTF. Just so you know, that as a point of comparison, I'm on the accreditation team for the American Statistical Association for the new data science certification. It's not out yet. This is presented with approval of with ASA. Did the same thing with ASA's core competencies. And so we did it with the American Medical Informatics Association and the Society for Clinical Data Management. We didn't want our program to just look good to us, look good to local people. We wanted to make sure it stood the test of time, that it would pass muster with professionals locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. So we believe we've done that. All right, now what I would like to say, I've had a number of people say, great program, we want to be there. It's a brick and mortar program. We're not online. We have online components, but we're not an online exclusively program. They said, we love it. We can't invest 2 years of our time or even a year of our time to come. Is there a type of program where you can boil it down and give a more intensive, like webinar short course program? And so what we've done is we've created a 50-hour executive education program like the ones at Harvard, like the ones at Penn and Chicago, actually. And it's a full-on week-long course where we take all of our courses and we bust them down to a couple-hour blocks, and including the case studies. And here you see in the pinkish purple colors some of the pervasive skills of critical thinking, leadership, team science, those kind of things. And so our eye definitely is on the graduate student who wants to be a scientist, who wants to see their data and have their data be represented as science all its own through a scientific lens. But there's a need out there for the working professional. Our goal is to meet that too, with the understanding that instead of using core competencies, we recognize that it's the learning objectives that operationally define in place the deliverables and the processes and the instructional pathway. We've got those learning objectives anchored to our main areas in our broader program that are tied to the evaluation strategy and the disciplinary source they draw from. So everything we do, consistent, similar to what you saw in the NCCU model, our goal is to tie everything to competencies and instructionally based, pedagogically based learning objectives. In closing, what does our program offer students? Well, a toolbox of skills and a context for practice that they thus far have lacked. We want to base it on a knowledge base that draws from other established knowledge bases and classifies it as a technical biomedical specialty. It will have the sanctioning of the profession. It'll be a formal graduate degree by our College of Medicine based on principles of educational theory and practice, with content mapped to the core competencies of JTF and 3 other professional societies that help mentor, advocate for, and lead the way in these developing areas of science. We're going to bring in clinical research ethics and project management, but we also have, and I didn't have much time to talk about this, a required practicum at a leading research organization. So for further reading, I can refer you to the 2023 issue of Clinical and Translational Science, where I laid out the blueprint for this. We also have a paper on internships in clinical data science that were drawn from the task analysis that Meredith Zozis did with SCDM. And then last month, we had a paper published in Journal of Clinical and Translational Science on the executive short course model. So we're trying to fill this out. But the thing I want to share most with everyone is that they are based on competencies that draw from learning objectives that are anchored in all the instructional modules and syllabi. Our references. So thanks. I'm glad to follow up, respond further. Feel free to reach out. Thank you for our time together.
Thank you so much, Rick. That was just terrific. Now we're going a little bit further internationally to New Zealand, where Raulle Sol Cruz will be talking to us about professional development of the clinical research workforce in New Zealand. Thank you, and thank you for being able to present despite the timing that you are suffering through for us. So, Raulle.
Thanks, Barbara, Steve, and Carmen. Kia ora koto. Warm greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. My name is Raulle. Work as a research manager for Health New Zealand Te Whatuora in the Capital Coast and Hat Valley region, and a doctoral candidate at Victoria University of Wellington. So today I'm presenting the foundation of my doctoral research proposal, which explores workforce that I am proud to be part of in the last decade. So this would not be possible if not for the Wellington co-funded doctoral scholarship from both these institutions. So this presentation will outline my personal attachment to this topic and why I am enthusiastic in providing evidence that will benefit the institution, my colleagues, and most importantly, our patients and community. So to show my insider perspective, why I am really passionate on this topic, let me please share my journey into clinical research, which has been shaped by both academic growth and frontline clinical experience. So academically, I began in business administration and management at UST, oldest university in Asia, established back in 1611, which gave me a foundation in organizational systems and strategic thinking. Later shifted into nursing, where I developed my clinical grounding and commitment to patient care. I studied master's degree while working as an ICU nurse in the Philippines, strengthening my leadership and research capability, and currently pursuing a professional doctorate at Victoria University. So professionally, I work as an ICU nurse, flight nurse, and part of a medical emergency team, roles that taught me discipline, teamwork, and realities of acute care. And this eventually led me into research nursing and coordination. And since then, never looked back, managing multi-center ICU trials and later into my current role as research manager. So the picture shown is the Milford Sound in the South Island of New Zealand, dubbed as the 8th wonder of the world. New Zealand is I strongly suggest to visit this place if you haven't been. New Zealand is a small, diverse country and undergoing the most significant health reform in its history. So this makes it the perfect place to understand what the national CRC workforce needs and how the JTF framework can support it. We operate under Health New Zealand, a single national entity created in 2022. The plan is to enable consistent processes and coordinated research governance across the entire country. So a lot of work is going on at the moment to achieve that. All clinical trials follow ICH-GCP and WHO registration standards with national ethics review provided by our Health and Disability Ethics Committee, so ensuring strong participant protections and internationally trusted data quality. So New Zealand also offers a diverse population, including Maori and Pacific communities, and has a track record of delivering high-impact global trials, supported by an efficient regulatory environment and strong hospital research networks. So as I've mentioned, our health and research environment is unique. It is shaped by the Treaty of Waitangi, or Treaty of Waitangi, which guides our obligations around cultural safety and equity of access. So the Treaty of Waitangi plays a central role in how clinical research is conducted in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Its contemporary principles shape not only our ethical obligations, but also the capabilities of our workforce to deliver high-quality, culturally grounded research. So Tinoranga Tiratanga, or self-determination, ensures Maori authority over decision-making. Partnership reminds us to engage with Maori early and genuinely, co-designing studies where appropriate. Protection extends beyond safety to include cultural integrity and Maori data sovereignty. Participation focuses on enabling Maori involvement across the research pipeline, from being involved as part of research teams or being recruited as participants. And equity ensures our work contributes to closing, not widening the health gaps. So together, this principle are a strategic strength for New Zealand. Here are a few numbers about our country. So we have around 5 million people across the country with a population that is diverse, but growing slowly and aging. 3 out of 4 Kiwis live in the North Island. So from 2006 to 2015, we were involved in a lot of clinical trials and had more than 1.6 million participants in those trials. Also, in a recently published article, New Zealand is top 5 globally, behind Denmark, Estonia, Belgium, Netherlands, in interventional clinical trial registrations per million population. Also, the NSED Institute of Economic Research showed at least $150 million yearly contribution of clinical trials on new medicines. The New Zealand Health Strategy has these 6 priorities in place. You can relate this research project to all, but for numbers 3, 4, and 5, it directly addresses this through valuing our clinical research workforce, fostering a learning culture to have a resilient and sustainable system. So what do we already know? So we know that clinical trials are increasingly complex, but workforce capacity hasn't kept up. AI-driven projects and the evolving requirements rapidly changing the landscape. Multiple surveys of research workforce and site staff internationally showed high workload, stress, role ambiguity, and intention to leave. Retention is also a major issue. Experienced coordinators are hard to replace, and turnover directly affects recruitment, data quality, and continuity of care. So in New Zealand, activity is concentrated in our tertiary centers and a small number of well-resourced teams, while many secondary or rural sites have limited or fragile research capacity. So our workforce roles are often fixed term as well, or project funded, making long-term capability hard to sustain. So we currently don't have a nationally standardized pathway for clinical trials workforce development. Job titles, role expectations, pay scales, and access to professional development vary wildly across our sites and even within specialties. Training is often ad hoc, reliant on local champions, industry sponsors, or individual initiatives rather than a coordinated framework. So we lack a comprehensive national picture of who is doing clinical trial work and where the gaps are and how professional development actually influence job satisfaction and retention. So to address this gap, I want to provide the formula and answer to this question of my doctoral research. What are the professional development needs of clinical research coordinators conducting clinical trials in New Zealand public hospitals, and how do existing professional development activities impact job satisfaction and retention? So with the 2022 PIORA Healthy Futures Act, 20 former district health boards or hospitals were unified into a single national system called Health New Zealand, de facto ora. So this creates a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build a coordinated, nationally consistent approach to strengthen the clinical research workforce. New Zealand increasingly participates in large international practice-changing trials, yet the workforce pathway remains highly variable with inconsistent onboarding, limited training infrastructure, making cross-site capability uneven. The rise of AI-driven trials and adaptive designs is reshaping coordinator roles. CRCs now require stronger digital literacy, data governance understanding, and competency frameworks aligned with evolving international standards. So New Zealand has no central data set describing its CRC workforce. the gap limits national planning, international benchmark, and system-wide innovation in workforce capability and development. So this study employs an explanatory sequential mixed method design. We begin with a quantitative survey to establish the national landscape of CRC professional development needs, job satisfaction, and intention to leave scores, and then analyze using descriptive and inferential techniques. So these results then inform a qualitative phase where semi-structured interviews enable deeper contextual insights analyzed through reflexive thematic analysis. Anchored in a pragmatic paradigm, this design allows the strength of each method to generate robust practice-relevant evidence. So in the quantitative stage, we begin by mapping the workforce, understanding who our CRCs are, where they work, and the context they operate in. We then conduct a JTF-aligned training needs analysis to identify capability strengths and gaps across the national workforce. Alongside this, we examine the professional development activities currently available to CRCs and how this relate to job satisfaction and retention intention scores. Together, the survey components provide the baseline evidence for the qualitative phase that follows. In the qualitative stage, we build on the survey findings to develop a more nuanced understanding of CRC professional development experiences. We explore perceived PD needs and the gaps between what is currently provided and what CRCs say they require. We also examine how access to PD or the absence of it shapes job satisfaction and well-being. Finally, we investigate whether in what ways professional development influences intentions to remain in or leave the role. So this insights will hopefully illuminate the contextual, cultural, and organizational factors that shape competency development. So from this study, we expect to generate a clear national picture of CRC PD needs. We will identify what CRCs require to perform confidently and competently, reveal the gaps, and understand how PD is accessed and experienced in practice. And finally, we examine how these factors influence job satisfaction and retention. So this work moves us toward the National Professional Development Framework for Clinical Research Coordinators. At its foundation is a standardized national onboarding approach that ensures every CRC enters the role with consistent expectations and baseline capability. We then build a JTF-aligned competency assessment tool to measure capability across the workforce in a coherent and nationally comparable way. And finally, we envisage a credentialing light professional recognition pathway. So a pragmatic model that acknowledges experience and supports progression without creating unnecessary barriers. So this study is intentionally structured around the Joint Task Force for Competency Framework. So it provides the conceptual foundation and global benchmark for defining what CRC capability should look like. So our training needs analysis is also fully JTF aligned, enabling us to measure capability systematically and identify gaps with precision. We then map these findings against existing professional development activities, such as the Health New Zealand and Praxis Australia recently launched online training modules, both of which are already underpinned by JTF principles as well, but shaped by our local context. So together, this forms the basis for a national professional development framework for our workforce. So the Joint Task Force competency domains give us a shared language for what excellence in clinical research looks like. The quote decided captures the essence of our challenge. Capabilities develop individually, but transformation only happens when the system moves together. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, our aim is exactly that, a movement that honors culture, grows capability, and ensures equitable access to world-class research for every community we serve. Thank you for your time and engagement. My hope is that we carry this forward together. This is something we can only achieve collectively, and I'm grateful to be on this journey with you.
Thank you so much, Raulle. This was really insightful, and love to hear more, which we will dig into a little bit as soon as we have the next speaker, which is from your neighbor in Australia, Advancing Professional Standards and Recognition for Australian Clinical Trial Professionals. Dr. Tim Boyle will present for us, and then we're going to open it up to conversation in the last minutes that remain. Thank you. Tim?
Thanks, Barbara. So firstly, for those who don't know about ARCS Australia, we're the national peak body representing life sciences professionals who advance innovation in healthcare. We just turned over 40 years last year. We support the sector through professional development, communities of practice, and targeted advocacy. And our members work across the medtech and pharma sector in occupations mostly in clinical research, regulatory affairs, drug safety and pharmacovigilance, and then market access. Australia has a long history of running high quality clinical trials. We have talented people, strong science, and a regulatory environment that is trusted globally. But like many countries, our workforce hasn't kept pace with the growing complexity of the work we're asking people to do. Trials today are very different to the ones we're running even a decade ago. We're seeing advanced oncology therapies, gene and cell therapies, decentralized models, and global multi-site studies, which have really tight expectations around quality, timeliness, and documentation. But at the same time, we're seeing a highly competitive environment for talent, and that's a global competitive environment. What we've heard consistently from industry, sites, and academia in Australia is that the workforce challenges aren't just about numbers, they're about consistency of standards, having recognised professional identity for those that work within the clinical research workforce. Clinical trials can no longer be treated as an accidental career in Australia. This is a profession, and one that deserves the same clarity and recognition as other health professions. And that's the journey that we're taking on in Australia. So we want to identify what this gap was. So way back in 2021, ARCS ran a medical technologies and pharmaceuticals workforce capacity summit, and it was clear that the clinical research workforce landscape was fragmented. We have multiple entry pathways, and none of them were consistent. Some people came in from nursing, some came from lab science, some straight from university, and their training depended entirely where they landed, whether it was a site, a CRO, a sponsor, and the level of support for their professional development varied enormously. There was no nationally recognised or agreed set of competencies, no common expectations for what a ready coordinator looks like or what an early career CRA should be able to do independently, and workforce mobility was limited, often just because of different organisations use different frameworks for the way that they structure their workforce. And what we're seeing is a system that relied heavily on on-the-job learning and trial and error and goodwill, and that creates a lot of risk around quality, timelines, and staff retention. So it's clear that we needed, from this summit, that we needed a more structured approach. Our ARC's journey really began when we delivered a program called the Ready Grow program. And the Ready Grow program brought structured, competency-aligned training to about 1,000 professionals across sites, CROs, and industry. And it used the JTF domains as the backbone of this training and introduced consistent language into the sector. But more importantly, gave ARCs real data. We learned where the capability gaps were, which areas of practice were consistently challenging, and how early career professionals were progressing, and then what the employers required that needed translation into a model, what the employers' expectations were, but they really couldn't tell us often. From Ready, we knew we could grow momentum, and it showed that there was an appetite for competency-based development in Australia, and it confirmed that the JTF framework made sense, but it needed translation to a model that worked better in our context. Now, Ready, the grant that supported Ready, also had provision within there to develop an Australian competency framework. So when this was all happening just before I started my role at ARCS, which was 2 years ago, and that work was kind of well underway. But what the consultants that we were paying to deliver this new competency framework, it didn't significantly differ from the JTF framework. I suspect that they were basically plagiarizing it. So I removed those consultants from working with us, and I killed that project, because the last thing the world needed was another clinical competency framework. But it set the stage for our next step in our journey. So before we start to design anything local, we look to global leaders. I can see Susan's on the call here. And the Joint Task Force Core Competency Framework, we believe was become the international language for clinical research competencies. It gave the sector clear definitions, and our GROW program was based upon it. And we like the harmonisation approach. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We looked also closely at ACRP's certification and accreditation program. We had existing relationship, and our industry-based members were telling us that that's what the standard within their organisations, with the expectation standards, was set at. But so demonstrate that there's already a highly valued, recognised professional pathway, and certification, while voluntary at the moment, this confidence, it strengthens workforce credibility. It creates mobility between organisations because there's a common standard, and that's not just within an Australian context, but a global context. And these frameworks and accreditation shows Australia doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to build on these foundations and interpret them locally and align them to our workforce needs and our regulatory environment. And we're still on this journey. We've been sitting on this for a little bit of time while we build building some of the infrastructure behind. I think I rushed into having conversations about what we needed a little bit prematurely, but we're coming along now. We'll probably do a more significant launch about our partnership with ACRP in the next few months. But the work that we started to develop in that, where we had consultants building an Australian competency framework, didn't go to waste. Post-GROW program review, I started to look at other competency frameworks and standards in the sector. So I looked at the RAPS Core Competency Framework for Regulatory Affairs Professionals, the MAPS Framework for Medical Affairs, and the International Society of Pharmacovigilance Frameworks for Pharmacovigilance and Drug Safety Professionals. And all these competency frameworks are very, very similar. There's usually some core competency domains, 3 or 4, which have the soft or translational skills domains. And then they have very specific technical domains that relate specifically to those occupations. So for ARC's members across all these different therapeutic development occupations and roles, it made sense for us to distill down a framework of the 4 common domains that are covered across the translational competencies. And the framework that the Ready team had started, the work that I killed in order to be abandoned, we sort of resurrected that, finessed it a little bit more by incorporating some more generic elements rather than research-focused elements. And the ultimate result was the ARC's Core Competency Framework, which you can see on the screen there, which is a nationally relevant, role-agnostic foundation that defines the essential capabilities that all those working in the Australian medtech and pharmaceutical sector need in our context and environment. And it doesn't replace JTF, but it connects JTF to the real world needs across the whole Australian sector. CROs, site CROs, sponsors, they give us a platform to build coherent training pathways where we can have core modules for everyone to participate in, and then specific occupational technical modules that build upon top of our core competency framework. We're building upon this at the moment. We've added post-nominals and a chartered professional status for members who can demonstrate they can meet the competencies in our core competency framework in a professional capacity. And we're also currently adding specific occupational technical domains to produce an Australian Life Sciences Capability Handbook. Again, this is through partnering with global peaks, the ones I mentioned before, rather than reinventing the wheel. Because we're not just focusing on clinical, we need to have a broader lens. Along this journey, our members will continually tell us more and more issues about the state of the clinical trials workforce in Australia. The challenges are going well beyond what we learned in our previous 2021 summit. So we held another one back in September this year, focusing just on clinical research. And the output is this new white paper. You can access it via that QR code. That will take you where you can access the paper. There's a couple of errors in the paper where we're smoothing out. One, they're all my fault. They're cut and paste errors. I was working on this really quickly to get a turnaround because of an opportunity with government. But since with these kinds of reports, mostly they get launched and people forget about them and they sit on the shelf. I want to really ram the significance of what the clinical trials workforce was telling us. In Australia at the moment, we've got massive investment in trying to attract inbound trials. Austrade, which is our global business development partner for government, they've invested $25 million to attract clinical trials into Australia. We've got a new IT system called the National One-Stop Shop, which is a research management tool and engagement with our regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, for clinical trials notifications and assessments. This is a new platform that will cost somewhere up to $500 million to develop, maybe more. And all these investments will be insignificant if we can't land the workforce problems and the challenges in our workforce. I created an explainer video, so I will play the video because it's more succinct than reading the report.
Right now, Australia has a massive opportunity to become a global powerhouse in advancing innovation in healthcare. But you know what? Our ambition is being held back by a really critical but solvable problem in our foundation. Let's break down this multi-billion-dollar opportunity that's at stake and why it's so vital we fix our clinical trials workforce before it's too late. Let's start with a number, a big one. $6.08 billion. That's the projected value of Australia's clinical trials market by the year 2033. This isn't just about economic growth. This number represents a huge opportunity to give everyday Australians early access to some of the world's most innovative new medicines. So what does that growth actually look like? We're on a trajectory from just under $3 billion today to over $6 billion in less than a decade. That's not just some number on a spreadsheet. it's a massive economic engine. It's creating high-value jobs in data science, bioinformatics, specialised healthcare, and perhaps more importantly, it means earlier access to cutting-edge medicines, such as treatments for cancer, for rare diseases that can reach Australians first. This isn't some far-off dream. We're talking about a 9% compound annual growth rate. And to put all that growth into perspective, look at this. While our market is definitely expanding right now, we only account for a tiny 2.2% of the entire global pie. What this highlights is the immense potential for expansion. But, and it's a big but, that's only if we get our foundations right and position ourselves as the go-to destination for international trials. So the real question is, are we actually equipped to handle that kind of explosive growth? Because here's the catch. Right now, the very engine that's supposed to drive all this growth, our skilled workforce, is frankly at a breaking point. The people we count on to run these world-class trials, they're facing a systemic crisis that honestly threatens to derail this whole opportunity before it even gets off the ground. This quote from the recent ARC's Workforce Summit hits the nail on the head. The whole problem starts with a basic lack of professional identity. You know what a nurse is, you know what a pharmacist is, but the roles inside clinical trials, they're poorly defined and they're inconsistent across the country. That ambiguity at the start, it creates a domino effect of problems. If you don't have clear roles, you can't have clear career paths. And without a path to move up, talented people just leave. The result is high turnover and burnout for those who stick around. And with no standard way to even get into the field, you end up with inconsistent quality and training efforts that are all over the place. It's a total vicious cycle. This has created what experts are calling the leaky pipeline. Basically, we're attracting these really enthusiastic, talented people into the sector, but the system just can't hold on to them. Newcomers are often gone in a couple of years, and the experienced staff, they just get burned out. We are constantly bleeding vital expertise, which is completely unsustainable for a sector that's supposed to be growing at 9% a year. Get this, just let this sink in for a second. This quote here highlights just how absurd the situation is. We have more professional oversight for Chinese medicine practitioners and podiatrists than we do for the people managing trials with investigational medicines. We're talking about drugs that are still in the testing phase, not even available to the public yet. This isn't just about jobs and careers anymore. This is about quality. It's about standards. And at the end of the day, it's about patient safety. But here's the good news. This entire problem is solvable. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Other countries have been through these exact same challenges, and they've managed to turn their sectors into global powerhouses. And when you put it side by side like this, well, the gap is huge, isn't it? While we in Australia have these fragmented state-by-state efforts, our competitors have gone all in on coordinated national strategies. The UK, for example, created an accredited professional register that gives the workforce a clear identity, clear standards. But South Korea, they took it even further. The story of South Korea is just incredible. They went from having pretty limited capacity to being a top 4 global hub for clinical trials, and they did it through a deliberate government strategy, a central coordinating body called Connect, and mandatory standardised training for their entire workforce. It's absolute proof that a strategic national approach gets incredible results. So what's Australia's path forward? Well, the great thing is, we're not starting from scratch. After a ton of consultation, we have a clear, evidence-based plan ready to go. And it's being championed by ARCS Australia, the peak body for life sciences professionals who are advancing innovation in healthcare. This isn't just another dusty report destined for a shelf. Think of it as a strategic blueprint. It pulls together insights from everyone, government, industry, universities, healthcare, to give us a single, unified roadmap to professionalise our workforce and lock in that $6 billion opportunity. The whole plan really rests on 4 interconnected pillars. First up, set up a national accreditation framework. This makes sure that a trial coordinator in Perth has the exact same recognised skills as one in Brisbane. Simple. Second, create clear education pathways all the way from university right through to ongoing professional development. Third, launch national graduate and internship programs, co-funded by government and industry to build that reliable talent pipeline we so desperately need. And finally, number 4, align government funding and policy, so it's all actively supporting this workforce development. See, each step builds on the last. It's one achievable roadmap to success. So this is where it all leads. This is the call to action. We've got the opportunity in front of us. We understand the massive threat, and now we have a clear, practical solution. The time for separate, siloed efforts and little pilot programs is over. It's time for a unified national commitment. For Australia's leaders and policymakers, the choice really couldn't be any clearer. We can keep going with this fragmented system and risk fumbling a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Or we can act decisively, implement this blueprint and build a truly world-class workforce that will be the bedrock of our biomedical future for decades to come. So we'll just leave you with this final question. Think about it. All the investment in new tech, all the world-class science, all of that incredible market growth, none of it, absolutely none of it can be fully realised if the people on the ground are unsupported and undervalued. The same people who drive innovation. The question isn't whether we can afford to do this. The real question is, can we possibly afford not to?
Right, so that sometimes that video explains things a lot easier than just launching reports. And we launched this at our Clinical Research Summit. It was last month, it was on the 19th of November. I managed to have as a keynote at that summit the former bureaucrat and former Australian chief scientist who is driving all of our policy reforms for clinical research and health and medical research. And he says the first thing he said he's seen in the last 18 months since our current government came into power that he thinks will actually compel government to change its policy, make investments in something. So I think it's a step in the right direction for us. But professionalisation is not just an Australian concern. I think every country is grappling with similar challenges. And the work happening in Australia aligns well with the global efforts to harmonise competencies, strengthen readiness, and recognise the specialised nature of our clinical research roles. There's enormous opportunity here for international collaboration and mutual recognition, and that shared investment in building workforce capability. Because the quality in clinical trials globally is only as strong as people delivering them, we invite and welcome engagement with others who are on a similar path, such as ACRP now certification. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want the change, recognition, action as soon as feasibly possible, and that ultimately means collaborating. If we collaborate properly, we can have a more engaged workforce, which means better access to patients and consumers, and fingers crossed, we get it right, it means better health outcomes for absolutely everyone. So just to close off, I think might be my final slide. In the past 2 years, I've learned that the path to true professionalism cannot be delivered by one organisation or one country. It's a collective effort that is across all countries, but also industry, sites, CROs, academia, government. We've taken these steps in Australia. We're trying to change our policy landscape so we get at least a national board to regulate the quality of our clinical research workforce and align things to a competency framework. So we're starting to advocate for those structures. But the people who deliver clinical trials, they're skilled professionals, and they deserve that clarity, consistency, and professional recognition for their specialisation and the work they do. So ARCS will support them. And by doing that, we hope to strengthen our whole clinical trials ecosystem. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was really fantastic. I have to say, I am so impressed by how this community has come together internationally around the JTF and in terms of the professionalization of this sort of effort and workforce. When Steve and I started this ages ago, he has always been, and I'll speak for Steve, an enthusiast for accreditation and certification of individuals. And I've always sort of resisted that because it's been a barrier, frankly, in many people's career. But what we've heard today is how this can be reconceptualized to being an opportunity, and an opportunity to sort of ensure that the workforce is trained, can deliver, can move where and in a way that makes sense for a growing industry, and that we keep our fundamental values of participant protections and data integrity as our first light. And for that, I want to thank every one of the speakers. We don't script what people will speak about when they ask and offer to speak in these meetings. And it's amazing to me that all 6 discussions today were about different elements of training and programs to, support the workforce in this effort. I have to say I'm a little jealous, Tim, and Raulle and others, of countries that are supportive at the moment of clinical research and, foundational scientific knowledge. But, I think we will come around, I hope. And I want to thank everybody for this enormous commitment to the work that we're doing and that you all are doing. But let me see if there are questions or comments from people. I do have to say that the last thing is we have to be very conscious that we continue to ensure that these programs are affordable. Because what we don't want to do is create a have and have not society or localization of clinical research. It should occur wherever there is need and wherever there is a sort of a compelling reason to move forward with understanding the optimal treatments and prevention and amelioration of disease in whatever country it presents itself. So, we still have a lot of work to do. And I really think it will be easier and more achievable as we hold together as an international and global community. So again, thank you. And let me open this for questions. And let me put Susan Landis on the spot, because as ACRP, she has been on a tear to create a professional designation, at least in this country, something that others already enjoy, but we've been struggling to achieve. So maybe you could say a word about that journey, Susan.
Absolutely. And I want to acknowledge Jared, Tracie, Denise, Charlene might be on here, others who've been on that journey. We were just emailing separately saying that we were crying because our head hurt about hitting it against the wall. So I must say that the presentations today are absolutely inspiring. We share the jealousy. We're green with envy. It just makes our task a little harder, but we continue to strive for this. The first thing we're striving for is recognition at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I just found it ironic from Rick that, data scientist has a standard occupation classification code, but a CRA does not. So CRC and PIs do, but all of the roles in clinical research do not. So one of the first things we're working on actively is getting recognition for clinical research profession into the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. The other, it's a very stressful time right now, but the positive side of the coin is that our administration has communicated that it wants to make clinical research in the United States more competitive. So that actually gives us a little bit of an open door to try to work with the administration to accelerate the clinical research profession being recognized at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we're working on that. The second thing is that we are working on creating a formalized pathway into the clinical research career in the United States. We were granted a very small grant from the NIH and NCATS this year to do some of that work, and that symposium will take place in the spring. And then finally, a critical piece of building the workforce in the United States is building the bridge from academia, specifically community colleges, and even down into high school programs, into the community. And Tracie's presentation today demonstrates what that can deliver, and with the support of Duke, obviously, and also UNC Wilmington, where Jared is. The work that academia, or the opportunity and the role that academia plays, is absolutely critical to building the workforce. And those bridges currently in the United States, they are not formalized. And what I loved especially about the presentation from New Zealand was the economic impact, and also with ARCs. But this is an economic proposition. In the United States, this is a labor force. This is a labor force. And it underpins a $23 billion clinical research industry that is expected to grow in 2030 to a $43 billion clinical research industry. Yeah. So tackling this from an economic perspective is key. So thank you, Barbara, for allowing me to stand on my soapbox. Allowing me to do that means I won't crawl under my desk today and cry.
But it is a very sympathetic audience you're speaking to. And I will say that, I've been involved with Korea for, I don't know, since the early days of Connect. And Tim, just to say, it's taken a lot, but it's taken a steady sort of commitment year after year, and to incredible success. And for that, Tracie, Rick, Raulle, and Tim, you're contributing in a really profound way to teaching us how to go forward in the communities we serve. So let me again thank our speakers, and thank you all for your commitment. I want you to please do two things for me. One is to send Carmen, me, or Steve any publications that you'd like to have reflected on our website. We are really pretty dedicated about maintaining an area for common communication. The second is the June 15th webinar. Again, we will be hosting a 2-hour discussion, and anybody who wishes to have a slot, it's largely first come, first serve, so long as you're nice to Carmen. And we'll do our best to accommodate everyone. Thank you so much. You will next see a posting of the Mari work as well as the Urdu translation. So thank you all.